Hello everyone, you're very welcome to the channel. And so this is our debrief for the Portuguese Grand Prix 2021. And it wasn't the most exciting race in the world. Let me start off with saying that. But despite that, it was still a very intriguing battle between Hamilton, Bottas, and Verstappen. In the end, it was Hamilton who won out. So 2 out of 3 race wins now for Lewis Hamilton. A solid start of the season for him. Of course, Verstappen won the last round in Italy. So yes, it's match point at the moment with Hamilton, but we have a long way to go yet in the season. So thanks for joining us for this review, and I do want to cover a few of the main issues during the race. We'll start off with qualifying, which took place on Saturday. And so qualifying was it was very interesting, probably slightly more interesting than the race itself, and I'll get into the reasons for that. But we had a very exciting qualifying session, and it looked like a very tight battle between the Mercedes and the Red Bull. And it was actually Valtteri Bottas who won out in the end and landed on pole position following the qualifying session on Saturday. And so I suppose this was somewhat expected because for most of us at the moment, nobody can see beyond the Verstappen-Hamilton battle that's happening. But of course, Bottas does have the ability, in particular in qualifying, to put in a very, very good result. And we've seen him out-qualify Lewis Hamilton on numerous occasions. So we should never forget that he can do this. So a very good start for Bottas. In fact, when it came into Q3, we actually saw that it was Verstappen who set the fastest time. However, he was judged to have exceeded the track limits in doing so, and as a result, he had his time taken away from him. Now, was this not fair? Well, into the rules that you can't exceed the track limits. And it was made very, very clear to the drivers what those track limits were ahead of the race weekend, so that there can't really be any argument there. What is ironic, though, is the fact that it looked like going off the track actually slowed Verstappen down on that occasion. So if he had managed to keep the car on the track, he would probably have gone faster. So it was a difficult one for him to take, and it's not going to be the first time he was in trouble with the track limits, as we will see moving through this recap of the race weekend. Bottas put in his first run in Q3, put in a very strong qualifying lap, which eventually actually turned out to be the main qualifying lap that got him pole position. And Hamilton then was a little bit behind him, a couple of thousandths of a second actually behind Bottas. But those thousandths make all of the difference. So this was a very important result, actually, when you looked at the top 3 starting on the grid. So it was actually Hamilton was starting in first, with Bottas second and Verstappen in third place, and Perez then was starting in fourth. But of course, second and fourth are on the dirty side of the grid. So you would consider that Verstappen had a perceived advantage going into the race because of the fact that despite him missing out on pole position, so first was ideally where he wanted to be, he was still on the cleaner side of the track in third place. And could he take advantage of that in the race? And that's what we'll get into. So we saw Mercedes looked like they were very strong in qualifying. They looked like they were very strong in free practice. Red Bull weren't as impressive as they have been on the last 2 weekends. That was just my view on it. But in saying that, we saw that Verstappen had the opportunity to perhaps take pole position. And that's how it worked out. And so that brings us through to the race weekend. And as you've seen, it was Lewis Hamilton who eventually won out at the end. You can see the top 3 on the screen. Here we go. So these are our top finishers in the race yesterday. Now, the race itself, it was very, very interesting. There weren't a lot of overtaking opportunities. And this is why I said it may have been more interesting in qualifying for once than in the actual race. Now, don't get me wrong, there was overtaking, but it was predominantly on the start-finish straight, and he was predominantly assisted with DRS. The other DRS zone, so there were 2 DRS zones, the other DRS zone on the back straight didn't provide many overtaking opportunities because the straight just wasn't long enough to capitalize on that. And then, of course, there was engine power as well, which you saw play a major factor. So we saw Schumacher in the Haas trying to overtake Latifi in the Williams, and it looked like every time they got onto the start-finish straight that the Haas just didn't have enough power, even with DRS, to challenge Latifi for the position. But I'll come back to that. So as I was saying, very limited overtaking opportunities if you discount the start-finish straight. So that didn't make it the most exciting race in the world. But what the race lacked for in excitement, it gained back in fascination and the battle that was about to unfold between Red Bull and Mercedes. How would the pit stop strategy go? I really feel like Red Bull should have won the season, but had a really bad pit stop strategy by comparison to Mercedes. So this was a key factor as well going into it. So the race got underway. There were no major incidents off the start. Hamilton actually had a very good start, and he was able to maintain second position. And Verstappen was able to maintain his third position, but he never looked like challenging for first or second in that initial run down to the first corner, and of course into the second corner as well. So that for me was a little bit of a disappointment, but that's the way things go. And then we had Kimi Räikkönen. Kimi Räikkönen, unfortunately, ran into the back of his teammate on the start-finish straight, and actually ended up losing his front wing. So half of it flew up into the air dramatically as we had a shot watching all the drivers come down the main straight, and you saw something was wrong because bodywork doesn't just usually fly around like that. And then after this, we had the front wing being stuck underneath the front of the car from Kimi Räikkönen, and he lost the ability to turn the car, went into the gravel, and was trapped in there. And that meant it was the end of his race. But as a result of that, the safety car had to come out. We had bodywork on the track, and of course we had a car beached off the track, which is always a danger in case another car would run off. So the safety car was deployed onto the track, and as a result of that, we had everybody bunching back up together again. The restart behind the safety car was actually, for me, was a lot more exciting than the actual race start itself. Usually, I much prefer the standing starts, but the restart was very good. You could see a couple of drivers had really kept their eye on the ball. Of course, I was very worried about this because Bottas was the main man behind the safety car, and he caused a bit of a pile-up to happen at the back of the field in one of the races last year. I think it might have been the Tuscan race. So I was hoping that didn't happen again, because at that point in the race, I just wanted to see some racing. There was no point having chaos and a backup and a backlog and everything else. So they restarted the race. Verstappen had his eye on the prize and was very close to Hamilton. He got a really good restart, and he managed to overtake Hamilton very, very quickly. That pushed Hamilton down to third place, and then Verstappen was battling for a while with Bottas. So he stayed in the DRS zone for Bottas. He just couldn't seem to get close enough. Just coming onto the straight as they were coming around the last few. He was just never in that 0.5 of a second gap. He was always more like 8 or 9 tenths of a second, and he couldn't make up the full distance with DRS. And then what happened? Mr. Opportunistic himself, Lewis Hamilton, and of course Lewis has all of the experience. As soon as Verstappen made a mistake and just fell outside of that DRS zone with Bottas, Hamilton saw his chance and overtook Verstappen to move into second place. From there, Hamilton himself pulled off fantastic overtaking maneuver. It looked like a really, really late lunge around the outside on the start-finish straight into the first corner. DRS assisted again, but a very late lunge, as I said, for Hamilton to go around the outside of Bottas. Bottas didn't make it easy for him. Hamilton went 2 wheels off the track, but he kept 2 wheels on, and he kept the foot down. He got them moved on. For me, it was overtake of the day. Definitely, it was a fantastic. And from there, Hamilton was able to control the race. And initially, he didn't pull away from Hamilton to a great extent, but he did just enough. And eventually, he pulled out 4 or 5 second gap, and pit stops had to come into it then. So this, for me, was the winning of the race. Hamilton, after falling behind to Verstappen, very quickly saw his opportunity again to get back past Verstappen, and then he promptly overtook Bottas as well. And that, for me, was the winning of the race. Then we got into the pit strategy. Pitting was very interesting because we had a number of cars who started on the soft tire, and then we had the other cars who started on the medium tire. As a result of that, we had different pit strategies happening, and we saw the likes of Ricciardo and Alonso really in the mix of the top 6 drivers for a while, because the other drivers were making pit stops, whereas those two were running long. In the end, the top 4, I haven't mentioned Perez yet, but Perez was in 4th place. The top 4 were running very long, and eventually when they came in for their pit stops, they all pitted onto the hard tire, with the exception of Perez, who ran even longer. And the strategy was that they were going to get him onto the soft tires towards the end of the race, and he would then go and set the fastest lap. So they did that. They pursued that option. He did set the fastest lap. However, he had quite a long distance to go on the tires, and I think this was the downfall that they had. So he couldn't take all of the life out of those soft tires, trying to do a really. So he put in his, let's say, his fast lap, maybe 12, 15 laps before the end of the race. And so he'd still quite a distance to go with these with soft tires. And by the time we didn't have the tires available to try and take on that fast lap again. In the meantime, in 4th place, he fell enough behind Bottas, who was in 3rd. He fell enough behind Bottas. By the way, the part I completely forgot to mention here is that Verstappen managed to undercut Bottas in the pit stops when they were pitting for their hard tires, and so Verstappen took 2nd place. And that gap between Verstappen and Bottas yo-yoed anywhere between 1 second all the way to 5 seconds, depending on what stage of the race we were at. And there was about a 5-second gap then between Hamilton and Verstappen. So coming back to the pit strategy, so Bottas had enough of a gap between himself and Perez to take the free pit stop. As a result, Mercedes decided they were going to get the fastest lap and get the point for that. So they kind of they played Red Bull at their own game there, and Verstappen then had enough of a gap between himself and Bottas due to the pit stop that Bottas had taken, and he also duly pitted and proceeded to try and take the fastest lap. So Bottas initially took the fastest lap, followed by another fastest lap from Bottas. Then Verstappen took the fastest lap, and at the very end of the race, it looked like Bottas could have another opportunity for fastest lap. He didn't make it, and it was Verstappen who finished in 2nd place behind Lewis Hamilton, who did come out with the fastest lap point. So there was a mini race happening within the race there. So I guess 25 laps to go in the race. It was already sealed. We didn't see anything happening unless there was something unusual that happened to Hamilton. So it was pretty much written in stone that we were going to have the top 1, 2, 3, Hamilton, Verstappen, Bottas, that you could see here on the screen at the moment. And so this mini race started for the fastest lap, the one bonus point that goes for the fastest lap. Hamilton himself, when he was informed on the team radio what was happening, considered possibly maybe pitting as well for the soft tires so that he could go for the fastest lap, and that of course could be a big advantage to him later on in the championship. Every point could count in this championship if it remains as tight as it has been so far between Mercedes and Red Bull. So in saying that, Verstappen ran wide on turn 14 and was judged to have exceeded track limits. Verstappen didn't know this when they were actually interviewing the drivers after the race. And, he expressed his surprise to this and said that he didn't think turn 14 was actually one of the mandated turns where they had to observe the track limits. It actually turns out that it was. He just wasn't sure about that. So Verstappen was actually penalized and lost that lap. And so the point went back to Mercedes. It went back to Valtteri Bottas. So Bottas ended up with the fastest lap. And I can't believe I took so long explaining that. So the real race was actually in the fastest lap, as it turned out. But as I said earlier, Hamilton had the race-winning moves when he overtook both Verstappen and Bottas for that race lead. That, of course, happened before the one pit stop that he took as well. And before I leave it very quickly as well, just to mention that Schumacher had a battle with Latifi, and this was major bragging rights here at the back of the field to see what they could do. So Mazepin came in last place, but Schumacher was in second last, Latifi third last, and Schumacher eventually got a move done on Latifi. Now, he didn't have the power on the main straight to get past him, but Latifi locked it up going into one of the corners in the back of the circuit, and Schumacher had his chance and got past the position. Now, he actually fight with Russell. Russell didn't have a great, actually ended up finishing fourth last. Schumacher said after the race that if he was able to get past Latifi sooner, he would have closed the gap on George Russell in the Williams. We don't know if that's true or not. And even if he did, once again, he would have had just as much difficulty in getting past the Williams running with the Mercedes power unit. So that brings us right up to the end of the race. From there, let's have a look at the race results. You can see them here on the screen right now. And maybe if I take some of the graphics off the screen, that will help us out as well. So Lewis Hamilton wins, Verstappen is second, who had a solid fourth place. Lando Norris, once again, a very good race result from him. We also had Charles Leclerc finishing in sixth place. We also had Esteban Ocon, very strong performance from him again this weekend, finishing seventh. Fernando Alonso ended up in eighth place. Daniel Ricciardo was ninth, and Pierre Gasly was in 10th. So full points finish for the Alpines. And for the McLarens, obviously, the Mercedes and the Red Bull, we all know about. Then at the next cars, we had Sainz. Disappointing race for him after all the promise he showed in qualifying, finishing only in 11th place. Giovinazzi then finished in 12th. Vettel was going backwards for the majority of the race, finishing in 13th place. Very disappointing from him as well after the promise he showed in free practice and in qualifying. Yuki Tsunoda had a disappointing weekend as well, finishing in 15th. George Russell was 16th. Mick Schumacher finishes ahead of Latifi. That's an impressive result for him in 17th. Latifi was 18th, and Mazepin was somewhere behind the rest of them in 19th. Mazepin had a very unfortunate incident as well with the blue flags, whereby he almost took Perez out of the race when Perez was leading at one stage after the other three cars had pitted. And as a result of that, Mazepin ended up with a 5-second time penalty. Not the way you want to go about doing these things, that is for certain. Disappointing weekend once again for Mazepin, and very hard to see any positives at all that we can take away from the Mazepin performance, unfortunately. Okay, looking next, what does that do for the driver standings? And you can see it right here. So Hamilton remains in first place, Verstappen remains in second, and Norris, with his consistency, remains in third place in the championships. So once again, a good race result for Lando Norris. Then we have next, you have Bottas moving up, replacing Charles Leclerc in fourth place in the championship, and surely Bottas now will be coming after Norris for third place. Very disappointing for Bottas if he can't at least place himself in third place in the championship. And next we have Leclerc dropping down one place, and Leclerc will be looking over his shoulder for Perez, who also, I would say, disappointing position for him in the championship and needs to find himself in the top four and realistically in a battle with Bottas for third place. That's how I would look at that. We have Ricciardo, who is in the top 10, obviously, but not that impressive by comparison to his teammate, but he needs to get back used to this McLaren car. We have Sainz then next in the championship. Sainz, of course, will be disappointed with his race yesterday. He's looked pretty solid up to yesterday's race, I have to say. It seems to have adjusted pretty well to the Ferrari so far, so probably a lot more to come from him. Then we have Ocon in 9th and Gasly in 10th, and Ocon moving up one position just to take that away from Gasly. And so that is what we have for the drivers' standings. And looking at how we're set for the constructors next. For the constructors, we have Mercedes on top, as you would expect, and I don't think that constructor standing has changed very much in all the years we've been watching this since the hybrid era started. We've Red Bull in second, not hugely far behind, less than 20 points in it at the moment after 3 rounds in the championship. Very impressive for McLaren to have them there in third place, and they're really putting up the challenge to Ferrari this season. Ferrari in fourth, Alpine in fifth, AlphaTauri then in sixth. I actually was expecting AlphaTauri to be ahead of Alpine at this point in the championship. AlphaTauri looking very strong in earlier rounds of the championship and, of course, in pre-season testing. But Alpine are slowly but surely, they're getting there. They appear to be making improvements to their car as they go by, or else there are certain circuits that are just suiting them better. Of course, Ocon very used to the car at this point in time, and a lot of talent there as well in Fernando Alonso. Aston Martin, look at that, only 5 points. Who would have thought that? So the aero rig's really not suiting them at the moment. And then we have Alfa Romeo, Williams, and Haas, all of whom have no points so far in the championship. So disappointing for them. Obviously, George Russell looked like he could be in with the possibility of a points finish in the last race we watched, the Italian Grand Prix, but he wasn't able to materialize that for obvious reasons. And I think he actually put his Mercedes seat under a lot of pressure by doing that. And by Mercedes seat, I mean a potential seat that he has next year with Mercedes, for that collision that he had with Valtteri Bottas, of course, another Mercedes driver. And that's it. So we move on next weekend to the Spanish Grand Prix, which will be taking place in Barcelona. Looking forward to that. And I must mention on Saturday as well, we have the Formula E race, which takes place in Monaco, and I'm very excited for that race as well. And we're planning to do a watch along on the channel for the Formula E race next Saturday. So we hope to see you there. Of course, if you have any comments, questions, anything else like that, don't hesitate to put them into the comment box below this video. Of course, give us a thumbs up to like this video, and please subscribe to the channel, because this is a fans channel. I really want to grow this channel so that we can have interaction during the races, during the watch-alongs, and have the comments coming in that we can respond to. Otherwise, it all gets a little bit boring. But I think that's everything from me now. So we obviously see how the championship stands at the moment. Its advantage with Lewis Hamilton, and Max Verstappen now has a little bit of work to do after yesterday's race result. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you again soon.